Hey everyone, welcome to the fourth installment of the Laughing Place Movie Club. They're going to be our first Marvel-themed episode, and that's why I'm here. I am Mike Mack. I am the Marvel editorial director at laughingplace.com, and I have some friends with me here tonight to discuss X-Men: Days of Future Past. So why don't we go around and kind of give an introduction here. Mike, we can start with you.
Hi, I'm Mike Celestino. I usually talk about Star Wars, but I'm minor in Marvel as well, and I like the X-Men movies. That's why I'm here.
I'm Bekah Burbank. I contribute to the news desk and manage the website a little bit. And my husband Kyle. I also like Marvel, so that's why I'm here.
Bekah, you do a lot more than any of the rest of us, I always feel. She is the behind-the-scenes person that really takes care of the rest of us. I'm Jeremiah Good. I believe I've been downgraded to Central Florida theme park bathroom correspondent. That's Bekah Rules. And I love DC. Oh, wait, that's completely wrong. I do love DC, but the Marvel films, especially the X-Men films, are some of my favorites.
Okay. Well, so we are going to talk about X-Men: Days of Future Past, as you can see right there. Widely considered to be one of, if not the best in the X-Men movie franchise. Is that something you guys agree with?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would
Mike?
certainly say, I'd say it is the last genuinely good X-Men movie. I would give it that.
I would say it's probably number 2 in the X-Men order, with First Class being the number 1. Yes,
I like
anything is.
So my favorite is X2, X-Men United.
Yeah,
I was going to agree with that as well. X2 is probably that, and I agree with Jeremiah though. First Class. You know, it's funny when I think of the X-Men movies though, I always leave out Logan. It feels like it's not a part of that same franchise, but that to me I think is probably the strongest of all the X-Men movies.
Well, don't worry. Soon you'll be leaving out a whole new movie after Comic-Con, apparently.
So, Days of Future Past. I mean, honestly, just from the title, it's a very complex story. We do get a lot of new characters in this movie based on from the previous X-Men movies. That includes characters like Blink, Sunspot, Warpath, who is played by Boo Boo Stewart of Descendants fame, by the way. Bishop, who to me I think was just horribly used, just a big waste of a great character. And then we have Bolivar Trask, who is the villain of sorts in this, and then the movie stealer, I think, in my opinion, Quicksilver.
I think I have a Sunspot somewhere. I got to get it looked at. Sorry.
I definitely agree with you, Mac. Quicksilver is the show stealer, and I actually just started watching it before we went live because it's been a while. And just the opening sequence where Bishop's there, and you're like, oh, and then nothing. I mean, Bishop and Cable in the X-Men films, well, Cable doesn't matter at all. But both those characters, I feel like they've been missing out on a lot. So it's good to see Bishop at least used a little bit.
Yeah, and Cable at least had a great, appearance in Deadpool 2, so that was awesome. But so there you go from Kyle. What is it? Aaron Taylor Johnson? Am I right with that?
Yeah.
I believe that's the other Quicksilver. Yeah. And then Evan Peters, who played Quicksilver in Days of Future Past, and then eventually X-Men Apocalypse as well. Which one do you guys prefer?
Well, gee, which one do you remember at all? I would say this one.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's got a good point. But I don't know.
Please expand, Bekah.
No, I don't know. I think I'm partial to the MCU, but that's,
I mean, I agree. And that version of Quicksilver was closer to the comic book version, at least. But in terms of just sheer entertainment from the scenes that we got to see. The X-Men Quicksilver was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I did like that whole kitchen scene where he puts his headphones in and then just running everywhere.
The scene that's so good that they decided to do it again in the following film.
Nobody watched Apocalypse. It's okay.
I saw it in the theater. All right.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say we saw it. We all watched it. We just regret watching it.
Don't we have a movie club coming up at like the end of the month with that, or a couple of weeks?
We do. That will be coming up soon. Yeah. Before I move on, Becca, I heard you have a slight problem with the billing on this movie.
Yeah. So I just thought I don't know if it ruins anything because it's, of course, at the end of the film, but Rogue makes an appearance for like half a second, and Anna Paquin is listed with like the main cast at the end, and she doesn't even say anything. And she gets billed before Famke Janssen and why can't it James Marsden and then also Kelsey Grammer's name doesn't even appear in the credits. I just thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, Anna Paquin is billed over Ellen Page, which I was like, really?
It's all about the dollars.
So
what I've learned about that kind of thing is that it's all contractual. It's all lawyers. It's all, well, Anna Paquin will appear in your film if she gets billed at this level. So it's got nothing to do with screen time, sadly, or lines. It's really just people negotiating.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you specifically mentioned Ellen Page because in the comics, at least, she's a huge part, or Kitty Pryde. I mean, Ellen Page is not in the comics. Kitty Pryde, the character she plays, is a huge part of this story. And in this movie, she doesn't really play that huge a role. I mean, she's the one that sends Wolverine back, but that's about it. She's in, I don't know, maybe a few minutes of screen time total. So I thought that was a little interesting.
They also never explain, like, Kitty Pryde's powers doesn't do that. That's not something she has the power to do in the comics. They just, they have to make her a part of it somehow so she can transport soul or body energy back through time. That doesn't make any sense.
See, the way I looked at it is she can phase through space, so why not phase through time? I don't know. You need a solution, so there you go.
Do we want to answer Benji's question here?
No.
Yeah, who is the better? Well, the rest of us can answer Benji's question. Okay. Who is the better Professor X? That's a really hard question for me, to be honest. What do you guys think?
I think my easy answer is Patrick Stewart, but I think James McAvoy is fine, but you can't beat Patrick Stewart. Also, I have a question for you, Mac. Now, I always heard that Professor Charles Xavier was not, I never read the X-Men comics growing up, but he was not British, right, in the comics. That was something they changed for the movies just because they wanted to cast Patrick Stewart, right?
Well, from the voices that I hear in my head as I read the comics are always British now. No, personally, most of my experience with X-Men comes from the 90s animated series. And in that, no, he did not have a British voice. So, but Patrick Stewart, I think, does play the character very well. And I think it's very similar to what I was saying about Quicksilver. He's the more accurate Charles Xavier, but McAvoy gives us the more entertaining performance, I think.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, it is definitely, Patrick Stewart is Professor X. Like, I think when the first X-Men movie came out and we all saw that, it was, okay, yeah, that's a given.
Right. So just to give kind of the outline of what Days of Future Past is, we start off, we're in the future. It's kind of a dystopian future. Mutants are being wiped out, and they have to go back and change the past in order to change the future, which Bruce Banner would completely disagree with. But so the idea is Mystique killed Bolivar Trask, who then influenced the government to push the Sentinel program, and that led to the wiping out of mutants. So they have to change that. So they don't ever explain what year, unless I missed it, what year it is in the future. In the comics, though, I thought it was funny to point out it was 2013. So actually 1 year before this movie even came out.
I just read it. The future in the movie is set for 2023.
Right, because he says they're sending Logan back 50 years to 73.
Okay.
I think that's how they did the math on that.
Okay. See, I wasn't told there would be math involved, so. So I thought that was interesting too, with some the look of some of the characters, because you get Colossus, you get Iceman, you get Kitty Pryde. Doesn't look like they've aged really at all since the last movie. I don't know if you guys caught anything like that.
Yeah, it's very much hey, we're just going forward. Like, we don't have to worry about anything. We're introducing these characters you'll know for 3 minutes, and you'll forget about them halfway through because Logan kicks ass.
The other thing that confused me too is that, I mean, continuity was never the strong suit of the X-Men movie series, but at the end of X3, which is nobody's favorite, Xavier has died, and then he like wakes up in somebody else's body or something, right? And then like in one of the Wolverine movies at the end, there's like a post-credit sequence where Professor X and Magneto show up, and they're like, Wolverine, we need your help to do something. And they're like, okay. And they go off. And then there's this is like the next thing. And it's like, doesn't connect to any of that. But they never explained like what, how did Xavier get his like regular form, right? That never got explained, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. Continuity is obviously a huge issue with this franchise, and that kind of is why they did this movie, I think. They kind of just went back and erased everything that happened prior to this movie. And that actually, I laughed as I watched it this most recent time. I think Ellen Page had a line of, she said something along the lines of, it'll be as if the last 50 years never happened. And it's kind of just like, it seemed to me like that was kind of poking fun at like, hey, we know we messed up. We're going to erase everything from before. So, yeah, go ahead, Jeremiah.
But they'll never be able to really erase the death of Phoenix in that movie. Like, sadly, then they go into the Dark Phoenix, which is like, okay, we're going to kind of retell what we've already done, but we're getting off topic.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, which death of Phoenix are you talking about? Because believe it or not, in this short-lived franchise, well, I guess it was a pretty long franchise, but that actually happened twice within these movies. So
yeah.
And I thought it was funny also that they rebooted and then ended up going with the same story that they have played in the past. But
well, isn't that kind of what they do with Spider-Man all the time? Like, tell his story over and over again.
That is true.
But, I'm sorry, you were going to say Jeremiah?
No, that's the thing about X-Men comics. Like, I've been a comic fan all my life, and X-Men is kind of defined by Wolverine, Days of Future Past, Sentinels, and Dark Phoenix. That's just, they repeat that same trend every 10 years. They bring back the exact same. Logan's dead. Dark Phoenix has returned. Sentinels have come back. So they have to do it in the movies because that's all people know.
That's true. I mean,
alert.
They do have. There are some other great X-Men movies, or X-Men villains. One of which we saw in another movie that we'll talk about in a few weeks, I guess. And then another one that we never got to see, despite him popping up, or at least a hint in a post-credit scene. But yeah, you're right, Jeremiah. There is a lot of repetition within the X-Men realm.
Which one was the one that popped up that we didn't get to see?
That would be Mr. Sinister. And that is a post-credit scene for Age of Apocalypse. So we'll get to that next time we talk about an X-Men movie.
Yeah.
Speaking of villains, one character that another waste of a character to me, I think, was Emma Frost, who appeared in First Class. And in a quick throwaway line in this movie, they explain that she was killed. Magneto kind of mentions it very quickly while he's talking to Charles. I don't know if you guys caught that. That to me was a big disappointment too, because that's another great character that could have been used more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this movie does a great job of, hey, just throwing away. They died. We don't need to explain anything. They just died.
Yeah, and the whole time travel fix doesn't even solve that, because they changed the timeline after that had already happened, unfortunately. So, I mean, not that it matters at this point. We're not going to see any more from this continuity or lack thereof at this point. So
we never know. We could see McAvoy pop back up.
Now, wasn't there a rumor that, speaking of Quicksilver, now I heard a rumor, maybe this is just one of those we got it made, or what's that called? We got it covered rumors.
We've got you covered, yes.
Got you covered. But I heard that Quicksilver from these X-Men movies was going to pop up in WandaVision. Is that like totally absurd?
I mean, it could happen.
Yeah, why not? When you have a character who's kind of, I mean, literally altering reality. I mean, I think it would be a pretty cool little nod to the X-Men franchise to have him pop up.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things. Oh, go on.
All right, go ahead.
That's one of the things.
Go ahead.
Okay, so that's one of the things about the X-Men, as you guys were talking earlier, how the Quicksilver in the MCU and the Quicksilver in the X-Men universe, the Quicksilver in the X-Men universe is tied more to the comic universe, because he even makes a reference about how his mom went out with somebody that had magnetic powers, referring to the fact that Quicksilver in the comic books is actually the son of Magneto, that it was taken off the books and put back, But there has been a lot of talk of, with the universes merging, that things like that could happen. And with WandaVision, that is kind of an open-ended, anything they want to do, they could do.
Yeah, that is a good point. I did like that they gave that nod to, like, oh, maybe Magneto is his father in this
Mm-hmm.
movie. And speaking of Wanda, actually, you do kind of get a brief glimpse as things are happening later on in the movie. You can see Quicksilver watching TV with the little girl.
Mm-hmm.
They're obviously not twins in this, unless there's some sort of Benjamin Button thing going on. But you can see his sister there, which would be the Scarlet Witch.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask that because I wasn't quite sure, but
I mean, they never, really tell us, but Quicksilver's sister would be Wanda Maximoff. So,
yeah, this was during the time of what falls under which contract, and some characters are X-Men, some characters are Marvel.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the whole confusion with mutants and them being Avengers actually goes back to the post-credit scene of Captain America: Winter Soldier, when a lot of Marvel fans cringe when Baron von Strucker referred to them as miracles as opposed to mutants, because they were not allowed to use that word.
there you go. Contracts and
Yeah.
Now we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Right. Looking forward to mutants popping up in the MCU. I do want to go back. I believe Benji posed the question earlier, which is the better Magneto? We talked about Quicksilver and Charles Xavier. Who do you prefer, Fassbender or Ian McKellen?
I like McKellen, but I also like Lord of the Rings, and that's kind of my sweet spot. I grew up with that, in that X-Men and X2, so.
I think Michael Fassbender is really great, though. Also, like, that's a tough choice, because I think in the earlier movies, Ian McKellen is great, and this one he's getting up there in age, and he doesn't move around that much. But Fassbender is definitely a great Magneto, also a younger Magneto, obviously.
Yeah, I think they both do the part very well. Sorry, but it is kind of like with Professor X. They play off each other perfectly. So it has to be the age of the villain and the hero need to be the same age.
Yeah, they did a really, really great job with casting for, I mean, I think for both the early 2000s stuff and then this like reboot. And yeah, I mean, I'm impressed and I enjoy both of their performances.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you guys said there. I think one area they were very successful in with this franchise was casting. I mean, obviously bringing in Hugh Jackman to play Wolverine, and then look at the star he is now. And then, as we talked about, both versions of Professor X and Magneto. I mean, even down to Ellen Page playing Kitty Pryde, I think was great casting as well. I think they did a really good job across the board. Were there any other characters that stood out to you as far as the casting goes?
Oh yeah, I want to talk about Peter Dinklage. I think it's really interesting. I think Peter Dinklage is a great actor. Love him in a bunch of movies. Station Agent, so fantastic. Game of Thrones, he's obviously great. I think it's really interesting that they cast a little person in this role and it's never mentioned or referenced that he's a little person. I think it's fantastic that that can happen, that it doesn't affect the role at all. I was even thinking like when Mystique becomes Trask, it's like it got me wondering like how her body is altered to become his height. But it's just interesting outside the box casting that I really appreciated.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I'm a big fan of Peter Dinklage. Also, he's a phenomenal actor. That scene in particular you were talking about, I thought it was weird on my most recent viewing. Like, why didn't Mystique stay disguised as him the entire time as she was looking through the files? But you know, a little bit of a weird, you know, issue there.
Well, we had to be absolutely certain it was her and that we weren't just
right
following him. So.
Can't have those plot points that confuse people. Oh wait.
So
yeah, the glowing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the glowing yellow eyes don't always completely give her away. And yeah, that is the point I was going to make. As Kyle points out, Peter Dinklage appears in both the X-Men franchise and the MCU as well in Avengers: Infinity War. He
actually gets to be his height in this movie, but then he's a giant in Infinity War. So.
Well, there's also the whole thing of he creates the Sentinels, which are, you know, the huge robots. So there's that.
Sure.
Yeah. No, I think like Dinklage definitely steals the show throughout this movie. He comes across as the villain, where he's not really the villain. He's just, you know, trying to save the world as always. So that's why I think his character translates one of the best in the film, because he's doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, didn't he say something in his first like meeting with all of the officials and about how with the mutants now we're the Neanderthals and we're going to go extinct, and it's like, yeah, you can totally understand why someone would want to pursue something no matter how right or wrong it is. Like it made sense. He made an interesting case for why he would want that.
Good poll, Becca. Good poll.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about like the final conflict that that comes down to essentially, you know, a small group of X-Men against Magneto, despite the fact that Magneto was mostly on their side for most of this movie, which I thought to be a weird trend in these movies. They always talk about Magneto as the big bad guy, but he really ends up being on their side for more of the time than actually against them.
Yeah, and I think that's always been the case with Magneto. He's not always the villain, but he's definitely never the hero. I mean, in some of the books, in some of the comic books, he takes over Professor X's job at times, but they do a great job of playing him down the middle, especially because, you know, he has the deepest story, I think, of any of the X-Men. And they start off talking about him, and, well, we won't go into the whole history of that, but they focus on him and why he has become and is who he is.
Yeah. The big fight at the end I thought was a really cool scene though too, where Magneto actually lifts a baseball stadium. I thought it just a really cool big climax, big battle scene for what was really just like sort of prior to this was like a small contained story, and then it ends up having this big blow up at the end.
My wife and I were trying to figure out which baseball stadium that would have been because we're not. Well, I'm not a sports person. She's slightly more of a sports person than me, but we still didn't know. Do you guys know which stadium that would have been in the 70s?
Well, I believe the Washington Senators would have been playing at that time. I'm not entirely sure of that, but that's the only thing that comes to mind.
Fair enough.
I can track it down while you talk.
I also liked the parallels between the two, between what the future mutants were fighting against the Sentinels, and then also, Magneto and. I'm sorry, I'm like, but yeah, I thought the parallels were really interesting.
Yeah, no, the fight scenes, those futuristic fight scenes were very fun as well, especially with characters like, I thought Blink was a very cool character to introduce. She's the one throwing up the portals all over the place, so everybody's just kind of flying around. Yeah, those fight scenes were very interesting.
Yeah, they underuse some of the characters, and I think that's one of my biggest problems is, even though I'm not a huge X-Men fan, I know the characters well enough where, I mean, Bishop is one of the badass characters in X-Men mythology, and he is in the film for 30 seconds, where they focus on Iceman fighting the Sentinel at the beginning for 3 minutes, whereas like just because we know who he is, which is a problem with these movies where they introduce a character for 3 seconds and they go, okay, that's all you need to know, where some characters you don't care about and they focus on them for half a movie. Yeah,
Bishop in particular bothered me, especially as a character who's pretty much based in time travel. That's kind of his whole thing. It wasn't used in a movie about time travel. It kind of just seemed like he was just there to, shoot a big gun at some robots. Like I said, though, I did enjoy some of those other characters. I think with characters like Blink and Sunspot and Warpath, Marvel fans aren't going to get too upset about them kind of just having these really awesome fight scenes and not much else. But I do think it's funny that these actors probably got casted in these roles and were all excited to be in a Marvel movie, and then they find out, we're just going to have you die a couple of times after about maybe 10 minutes of screen time. So I always think something like that is funny when you get that sort of situation.
So the baseball field would have been the Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Stadium.
Okay. Can you tell who played there? Whose home stadium that was?
let's not try to talk about sports. It's not going to work.
Well, welcome to Laughing Place 1970s Baseball Club.
Senators.
There we go. All right.
Is that Doobie? Probably. So I have a question about the very end of the film. I don't know when we're going to get to that point. Do you want to save it for then, or you want to do it now?
No, we can jump into that.
Okay, so the movie ends with Wolverine. He wakes up, and the timeline has been changed. He's in the X mansion, and all his buddies are alive again and stuff. And then we flash back to them taking Wolverine's body out of the water. And, apparently Wolverine doesn't drown, right? He can just survive after being underwater for that long or whatever. But then you see William Stryker is there, and he takes Wolverine. And you think, oh, he's going to take Wolverine up, put the metal in his body again, right? But then you see it's actually Mystique because his eye changes. So is the implication that in this newly created timeline that Wolverine does not have the adamantium skeleton anymore? That's my question.
at least for now, he, and I don't want to get too much into Apocalypse, but he does have a little cameo in there where that he would have just undergone that surgery or that procedure.
I forgot about that. Yeah, because they go there. Oh, we'll talk about that next time. But yeah, so that's pretty much the same timeline then. So I guess we'll never know how Stryker then got him from fake Stryker, aka Mystique.
Did Mystique go on her own, or did Charles send her, or like why was she? I mean,
It's just a cool ending, I guess. They didn't expect us to ask any of these questions.
Yeah, it seems like it was a twist for the sake of a twist, really.
Okay.
Yeah, like we'll address this 5 movies down the line. Sure.
Well, yeah, and I'm like, how long was he there? Like, was it hour? I mean, obviously not too long if she was the younger Stryker, but yeah, that's what's going through my mind as I'm watching this.
Yeah, I did want to mention that scene that you briefly mentioned, Mike, when they're in the newly changed future in the X-Men mansion. And you see Wolverine wakes up and he goes and talks to everybody and he talks to Jean, which implies that Jean is there in the future. However, a couple of movies later, we get Dark Phoenix where, things don't really go well with Jean. And some things change. So again, like you mentioned earlier, Mike, the continuity kind of just doesn't work out as even in this movie that is supposed to fix their continuity, kind of just.
I honestly think these movies are made for people who have only seen the other ones once. And you're like, oh, I kind of remember these people. And then I'll watch the next one and I'll be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But if you've watched any of them more than once, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't add up at all. But
it's definitely we're doing this for the money because, yeah, I mean, each of the films contradict each other as they go on, and the further they go on, the further deeper into the hole they get, which is why I think New Mutants is just going to erase everything, and at the end they're going to wake up and they're all going to be in the MCU.
I like it. If New Mutants actually happens at some point.
Yeah, do we think that's still going to happen? Or
they announced that San Diego Comic-Con there is a New Mutants panel, so maybe we'll learn everything at that.
Yeah, that poor film just keeps getting pushed from release date to release date to release date.
It shouldn't.
We'll
be
see it eventually.
That's a sign.
I when the trailer for that did come out, I was pretty excited to see how that could play out. It's a very good premise, but who knows when we'll actually see it. Did anybody have anything else that they wanted to talk about within the movie specifically? I wanted to get into the post-credit scene as well, but before we get there.
Before the post-credit scene, just way back when Eric and Raven or Mystique meet in the bus station or train station, she pulls him into the phone booth, but it's like a glass phone booth, and she's like threatening him with the knife. I was just like, really? That's where you're gonna do it? It's like, that's pretty public. I don't know.
We have to understand. Go ahead.
Maybe you can help us, Jeremiah, with you being the Superman expert. That should work out.
I was going to say, we have to understand that phone booths, when we had them, nobody could see inside. Nothing. As soon as that door closed, invisible.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point.
And, if you take your glasses off, too, you're a completely different person. So,
Mike, we've not seen you with your glasses off before.
Who is that?
You can tell by the levels of bags I have under my eyes how much sleep I've been getting lately.
Okay, post-credit scene.
Yeah, so post-credit scene, we got we lost Mike there for a second. We had I guess that was Superman that joined us. The post-credit scene, we see at first a mysterious figure kind of using mutant powers to put the pyramids together.
Looks like Minecraft.
Yeah, it turns out that is Apocalypse, and you can see his 4 horsemen behind him in the distance. When you first saw this movie, did that post-credit scene mean anything to you guys, or do you have any sort of attachment to it?
No.
I knew Apocalypse from the TV show, from the cartoon, but he didn't look like that. He was like purple, wasn't he, in the cartoon?
Yeah, purple.
His face was the same, but he had a different armor sort of set up.
Yeah, I didn't know who it was right away. I had to look it up when I first saw it, and it also wasn't Oscar Isaac. Not that that would have helped me at that time.
Right.
Benji, can you just put up the Nerd Alert banner right now for me? I guess not. Oh, there it is. I will say that I was definitely the guy in the theater that lost it when that post-credit scene came up. Like because at that point we didn't know what was going on with the X-Men in the future as far as the franchise went. And when that came up, like when it starts, I'm never quite sure, but when they pan out and you see the Four Horsemen, I just lost it. Everybody in the theater, it's a lot going to see MCU films where it's a rare, like some character nobody knows about, and one person gets it, and you hear that, oh my God, that was me. And then I'm not going to spoil our next X-Men, but I was a little disappointed in Apocalypse.
I was proud that I knew Thanos when Thanos showed up at, what was that, the end of Guardians of the Galaxy or one of them, when they had
Avengers.
Yeah, right. I was happy that I knew who Thanos was. That's about as deep as my Marvel knowledge went.
What about you, Mac?
I was on your side there, Jeremiah. I was definitely very excited. I probably was a little bit too animated at that point, and my wife probably was a little bit embarrassed of me. But I was excited. Apocalypse was always one of my favorite villains, and like I said, my X-Men history was basically with that '90s animated series, and he was in some of the best episodes of that series. So I was very excited about Apocalypse, and then a little bit let down at the end, but for the moment, I was excited.
But we'll address that later on.
Yeah, exactly. I did want to point out a couple of differences between the movie and the comics. The comics is really hyped up as this great, overall arc. It's really just two comics. It's very short. It's a very short story. We already mentioned in the comics, it's Kitty Pryde that goes back in time, not Wolverine. Obviously makes sense. Hugh Jackman was the big draw in this movie, so want to get him as much screen time as possible. Bolivar Trask was not Mystique's target in the comics. It was actually Robert Kelly, who was featured in the first X-Men movie and was Magneto's target. Mystique in the comics was working with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, which included at the time characters like Blob, Avalanche, and Pyro, some great other X-Men villains that a couple of them have seen screen time in some of the other X-Men movies as well. And then the team in the future X-Men that you see fighting those futuristic Sentinels was very different from the comics. The comic series actually included Franklin Richards in that futuristic team. So, Mike, I know you're a big Fantastic Four fan.
Yeah, Fantastic Four. I know. That's my big. I've read most of the comics at this point. I've been trying to go through all 700 issues or whatever they are. I'm working my way through, but before I die, I'm going to get through all of them. But yeah, I love the Fantastic.
And Mac, one of the things, Franklin Richards' girlfriend is the one who sends Kitty Pryde through time.
Yes, yeah, the telepath who also somehow has those powers that they don't really explain either. So, and Mike, to your point, we will talk about Fantastic Four in the future as well. So,
yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. We're doing the how many Fantastic Four movies did they make to retain the rights to making Fantastic Four movies over the years? This is certainly
There's 3, right?
No, there's the one that was never released.
Oh, yeah.
Roger Corman.
People were calling for Human Torch to get a MCU role because we redeemed, or Chris Evans and Michael B. Jordan were redeemed by the MCU. Yeah. Right?
Oh, yeah, they should go back to that original one, whoever the Human Torch is in the original Fantastic Four movie, and find a way to bring him into the Marvel universe.
So that's all I had for X-Men Days of Future Past. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
I think I'm good.
Oh, should we talk about the discrepancies between what they're censoring on different films in Disney Plus?
You mean butt versus no butt?
Yeah, and swear words and stuff, but
Yeah, that did
Just
catch me off guard when watching this on Disney Plus. But
I think I actually did note that oh, they kept it. So
me too.
So for those of you who don't know, for Splash, they censored Daryl Hannah's rear end, but for Days of Future Past, they show Logan's butt. So,
And Professor X has an F-bomb.
yeah.
yeah,
well, they've shown now with Hamilton that you can say at least 2 F-bombs, is it?
It's
Or
just one.
just one?
There's
Two?
actually none in Hamilton as it stands right now on Disney Plus. There's half of one.
a very long, drawn out half of one. Yeah. So unless anybody else has anything they want to jump in with, I think we're gonna wrap it up for tonight. So thanks everybody for joining me to talk about X-Men Days of Future Past. We'll be back soon to talk about X-Men Apocalypse as well.
Yeah, go watch it on Disney Plus now that we've ruined it for you.
All right. Thanks everyone.